Hello, and welcome back, friend. Now that's the face of someone who's conquered the neighborhood. As promised, here's the topic of Onion's class today. Crowd control, fire, and the benefits of regular exercise. So far, we've learned how to dish out our brand of hospitality to our neighbors, but this time we'll put the spotlight on the zombies. Our mostly predictable friends are exactly that. Predictable. They like taking long walks in the woods, and in the cities, committing acts of vandalism. They're very much attracted to the sight of one breathtaking survivor, and they are always keeping an ear out for any sort of noise, as there is not much else that excites their now mindless existence. While this makes it sound like they're easy to deal with, remember that they are numerous, determined in their pursuit for excitement, and it only takes one sneaky boy to ruin everything. We can use this ravenous mob mentality against them with equal parts thinking, footwork, and observation. In the midst of your fight against the undead, you may not have noticed a behavior that they exhibit when they attempt to sully your Sunday best. You see, when they have their arms outstretched like that, they're attempting to go after you directly and see nothing else in their way. The other zombies around that don't have their arms reaching for you are still approaching you in a similar direction, but if we put something like a car or some untouched pre-existing furniture in the world in their way, things start to look a little different. Some of the zombies with outstretched arms are snagging on the obstacle for a few seconds, and some of the ones walking normally are taking another path around the obstruction. Using this in combination with our mastery of fences makes it that much easier to split the horde into smaller, more manageable fights, making more breathing room, or to retreat and fight another day. Another observation shows that if they're in a state of aggression brought on by either seeing you or following any sort of noise, they'll start to attack anything that they can break if it happens to be in their way. This list includes windows, doors, barricades, player-placed furniture, and player-built walls. As they'll have their attention fixated on trying to break any of these objects, this is another effective means of controlling the horde to your advantage. With that being said, you can run through buildings to split or lose a horde by leaving shiny things for them to break while you sneak out through your window or door of choice. Use this information as you see fit. Whether it's sneaking around the side and fighting the zombies in several smaller groups or leaving them in there with some newfound toys to play with. On the topic of noise, I would hope that you and the shout key have become good friends by now. I've shown how to corral zombies, briefly mentioned drawing them out of forests, and whispering by going into sneaking mode. Now if you happen to have access to a vehicle and you're sitting in the driver's seat, pressing the shout key will activate the car horn, which has a large sound radius that you can utilize by drawing a horde to that location, and retreating to a spot that you've cleared out, whether by a car or on foot. Think of this as something like a really weird game of Ding Dong Ditch, but with a starving, angry, undead mob. If you have an emergency service vehicle like an ambulance or a police car, you can utilize a siren by holding down V, selecting the light bar option, and using whatever siren option sounds the coolest to you. As long as the service vehicle's battery is functional, you can leave the siren on as long as you need. Just remember to be aware for any zombies heading your way if you're using either of these methods to lure them out. Now, if being loud and proud is either not your thing or isn't the best option at the time, consider sneaking past the zombies. If you're in a situation where it's not the most practical option to go loud, whether your character is tired, low on supplies, or injured, then let's dive into how to avoid the Zeds. Much like us, they also have a cone of vision, and if they see something they want, they'll make a beeline towards it, and by now we also know that they're attracted to noise. I've briefly mentioned breaking line of sight from the zombies. Let's go into that a little further. This isn't simply a matter of going around a corner and they just suddenly forget where you are. They will attempt to look for you at your last known location based on a combination of sight and hearing. Hence why I demonstrated making a sharp turn and going past trees at the end of the zombie herding maneuver at the end of part 1 in this series. The sneak jog plays a large part in the maneuver, as you'll make less noise compared to running normally. While we're in sneak mode here, we know that they can see pretty well in front of them, and unlike Skyrim, you can't exactly max out your sneak skill to steal the shirt off their backs. Much like the average person, If they don't hear anything behind them, then there's not much reason for them to look. If a majority of a group of Zeds has their backs turned on you, you can either sneak by them, or use this opportunity to dispose of them by whispering to draw the attention of a few zombies at a time. If you choose the latter, one might be tempted to start swinging their weapon at them when they get in swinging distance. Most modern games have tailored us into believing that melee is generally a silent and graceful means of taking out enemies. In this game, however, you're more akin to a Gravy Seal instead of a Navy Seal, and melee is messy business. After whispering and drawing some zombies towards you, make a little more distance so as to not draw the rest of the horde to your scuffle. That was a bit of a long-winded segment about the many ways we can mess around with the neighbors. I've mentioned retreating plenty of times and several ways to break up a horde into more manageable numbers, but what if we wanted to use the crowd balling up together to our advantage? I hope you brought enough bourbon for everyone, a pack of smokes, and a lighter to pass around. We're about to spice things up a notch and get some mood lighting for what we're going to do. That's right, we're about to make a Molotov cocktail. You can do this from the crafting menu by either pressing the B key, clicking on the hammer and square icon on the left hand side, or right-clicking on the bottle of whiskey in your inventory tab. Once that's done, and you've gathered a decently sized crowd, equip the Molotov cocktail as your primary, and don't forget to equip a lighter as your secondary. To throw it effectively, aim the cursor somewhere in front of the horde, left-click, and marble in the blaze that you've created. Now, as satisfying as this homemade inferno is, it does take some time for the zombies to be cooked to perfection. Because of this, you'll want to try and keep them as tight as possible, and make sure none of them wander off. Take care as you corral the zomboys, since they can leave random fires on the ground, making diving between them that much riskier. Remember, it only takes one bad injury to make things go south, and burns are one of the more severe ones to deal with. Another risk with fire is that it has the potential to spread quickly and destroy loot locations if left unchecked. As bad as all of this sounds, it's still an effective means of disposing the undead en masse, as any damage dealt to them is damage and they will die eventually. This also takes care of a majority of the corpse disposal process, as most of the bodies will turn to ashes. I'll go a little more into that last sentence in the next video. In the event you end up pre-cooking yourself or the fire's getting out of hand, you'll either need a fire extinguisher or a water container that can hold as much as a full regular plastic bottle. Once you have either, right-click on the fire, and select the extinguish option, which brings up a circular cursor that shows the area that the extinguisher or water container will put out. Something very important to remember is that they need to be in your main inventory, and not in a backpack or on the ground nearby for this option to appear. You can't combine water containers together either. You must be really feeling the burn between fighting, running, and hanging out with some toasty boys. It's not all bad though, as every day survived is another day being stronger than before. If we go to our skill list here, which is accessible from the health panel covered in the previous video, we can see a long list of things that we can train up. For now though, I'll put the spotlight on strength, fitness, and nimble. Strength affects how much you can carry, and how hard you can shove and strike the zombies. Fitness is almost everything that has to do with stamina. Recovery speed, stamina loss, and the rate you get tired in single player. Both fitness and strength can be gained over time by various activities like carrying more than half of your weight capacity, fighting zombies, sprinting, and exercises which can be found under the health tab in the character screen. Just be aware that working out will hit you with exercise fatigue roughly 12 hours after hitting the mat. How long the fatigue and pain lasts depends on just how hard you want to push your character. The nimble stat dictates how fast you move while you're in combat stance, and can be trained by simply moving in combat stance. I put the spotlight on this one specifically since you will hit a point in leveling the skill up where you keep pace with the zombies and eventually outwalk them while in combat stance. At around level 4 nimble, most of the weapons with shorter recovery time between swings can keep pace with the Zeds. At level 5, most melee weapons can easily keep pace as long as you're timing your swings. Once you hit level 6 nimble, you'll need to start getting a little more active or creative in your footwork, especially with shorter weapons. Now, why not simply stop for a second and swing, one might ask? While that would seem like the logical option, there is something you've probably seen by this point that you may or may not have noticed. If a zombie is too close, instead of swinging your weapon, Your survivor will shove the zombie. This doesn't sound like a problem at first, but until now you've probably been backpedaling while dealing with the horde. If you stand still while shoving, you'll be locked in place until you're done with the animation. The split second you're frozen is a vulnerable position in most cases, as it'll give time for any zombies behind the one that you're shoving time to catch up to you if you don't readjust quickly enough. This was a bit lengthier of a lesson, but one to end Onion's general combat tutorial trilogy in a blaze of glory. Obviously, these don't cover every single situation, but if anyone is new to the game, or even if you are a few hours into the apocalypse, I hope you enjoyed or learned something new. As always, here's a few tidbits of advice I can send you off with before concluding this video. Have a plan if you're using fire. Since it takes a while for zombies to burn to death, bring ample supplies and set aside some time if you're playing solo. If you lack the resources for Molotov cocktails, you can use campfires, set a pre-existing corpse on fire with gasoline, or start a building fire if power is still available. Use that last one at your own discretion. Currently, rain only affects fire spread on the ground. Zombies that are on fire can still spread fires by contact, and both Molotovs and campfires can still be used in the rain. Plan out your exercises. Working out in the morning may put you at a disadvantage if you go on a loot run later that day. If the weather or your character is looking particularly awful, and you have a well-established base, consider taking the day off to let the weather or injury pass. The next topic I'll cover will be an in-depth at those funny little circles in the upper right that we call moodles. Until next time, only you can prevent forest fires. Or don't, that's cool too, I guess. Like, dislike, leave a comment, subscribe or don't. Either way, I hope you have a fantastic day.